Okay, I'm back, hopefully. All right, let me just pick up from where I left off, and then hopefully we can summarize it because that was all that was left. I'm so sorry. It's this cable under the sea in West Africa, as though we don't have enough to deal with, honestly. But basically, what I was saying is that ultimately within both Western media and Muslim community media, there is this hypervisibility of Muslim women that creates this idea of what Muslim women should be and should look like. And that is very damaging because what it tends to do is create this idea of what Muslim women should be and then stigmatizes Muslim women who don't fall into those ideals. It creates this idea that Muslim women should, who do anything that does not fall into those mainstream representations, are breaking stereotypes, right? As though they are doing anything that is not falling into what is expected of them is something very revolutionary and something that they would otherwise not be capable of. What this does is kind of perpetuate this idea that Muslimness is an impediment, that Muslim women cannot do things because they are limited by their religion or by the fact that they wear a scarf or whatever it may be, right? Again, very damaging. And so ultimately, what the consequences are of these ingrained ideologies are multifold, okay? There are very many negative consequences, which is what we said we were discussing with this topic. I'm so sorry. This live ending just threw me off a bit. So, just to recap, right? The title of this lecture is that is does of Muslim community media and Western media representations of Muslim women. So right now I want to focus on the consequences part, right? Um, you probably noticed I use the word complex quite a bit throughout everything that I was talking about because ultimately what I'm trying to get at is that representations will never be wholly representative because they ignore the complexities that exist of Muslim women. That you get Muslim women in all shapes, sizes, colors, nationalities, cultures, you name it, right? Across the board, there are varied experiences of what Muslim women look like. And we should not only be focusing on what Muslim women look like or what we outwardly um, give of ourselves as Muslim women, that it is about more than that, and that it is not up to us to constantly be critiquing uh, Muslim women as flag bearers of Islam or whatever it may be, because that is not a responsibility that they asked for or that we asked for, rather. And so, by ignoring these complexities, we lend to making life very difficult for Muslim women. And so, ultimately, we need to just check ourselves and make sure we don't do that. And kind of do our best to minimize the judgment and expectation that we place on Muslim women and look at ways instead that as a community we can support Muslim women and do what we can to uplift them and to lend to nuanced representation and when we can lend our voices to helping to uplift them and to give them more support overall because ultimately both in Western mainstream representation and in community representation, but especially within community representation, there is not a lot of support that is given to Muslim women, especially to Muslim women who want to do things that are unexpected or that go against the grain of what people would consider appropriate. And the thing is, we don't, a lot of the time, we don't do the same thing to men, right? We don't critique them in the same way that we critique women. And at the same time, we also don't always critique women who don't visibly cover themselves as much as we sometimes do women who do cover themselves. And I mean, this is going into completely different territory, but a lot of famous, uh, Muslim women bloggers who uh, have removed their scarves or whatever it may be, have kind of cited that as a big kind of thing which threw them off, is that people would constantly critique them but not give them support. Okay, and the thing is, as Muslim women who cover, we already live in quite a hostile world because of the consequences of mainstream media representation, right? Which means that in broader society, people are not always tolerant of Muslims. People are not always tolerant of Muslim women in particular. And because women are more vulnerable as a group and easier targets, a lot of the time, Islamophobic attacks are born by Muslim women. That's BORNE, born. And we cannot ignore the ways in which media plays a massive role in that kind of thing continuing to happen. And so ultimately, across the board, what I'm trying to say is that the consequences of these representations, whether it's in community media or mainstream media, are that Muslim women are not seen for the complex beings that they are. And so we ought to do our best to do away with that understanding and that rationalization and try and respect complexity across the board, not only with Muslim women, but especially with Muslim women. We need to be more tolerant, we need to be less judgmental, and we need to be more supportive because tolerance is doing only so much, right? Support is a whole other playing field. And yes, so it is ultimately stereotypes that put Muslim women into boxes and make it seem like there's only one type of Muslim woman. And so, as much as we should always do our best to kind of challenge these stereotypes, it is not our job to be disproving these stereotypes to anybody. Muslim women do not owe explanations for their behavior, right? We're not children that need to be chided or infantilized or whatever it may be. We deserve the same level of respect and autonomy that anyone else is given, particularly other people within the Muslim community. And so, inshallah, I'll end on that point because I feel like I'm rambling a little bit. I'm so sorry about this internet connection and what ended up happening, but I hope you got the gist of what I was trying to say, and I hope I didn't bore you to death. And I hope that you'll engage with me further. I'm always happy to talk about this topic. It's something I feel very strongly about. I see another question from Asif. Is it fair to say we can only ever really represent ourselves as individuals? We can't truly claim to speak for others. 100%. And I think that's a really important point, particularly for people who will use this idea of their Muslimness as something to take them forward. It's not nice to say, but in diversity Olympics, for example, right? Which I would argue that sometimes the models, like the ones I was showing you earlier, do, right? They will say, look at me, I'm the first one. And that becomes their marketing tool. But it's not about that, right? And you cannot claim to be speaking on behalf of an entire religion of people. Okay. And so, to answer your question completely, we cannot really represent ourselves as entirely representative of a whole community if we don't explicitly have a community's permission for that, right? And that is why when critique is leveled, we cannot take it um, as people will dismiss, people who perpetuate this will dismiss it as these are haters, these are people who are just hating on me because they wish they were the first ones. And it's not about that. It's about saying you cannot claim to be representing me when I see what you're doing as a misrepresentation. And so, for sure, we can only ultimately truly represent ourselves. Okay. Um, Thank you, Amara. That's very kind of you to say. Thank Amara Gada. Thank you, Amara Aronsa from MSA Union, for helping me out so much with all the technical stuff on the side. Again, MSA Union is doing amazing work. I'm so grateful that I had a role in this organization when I was a student. And I think from the time I was there under Kamil's leadership and now under Shakil's leadership, there is amazing, amazing stuff going on all the time. I'm so proud to be associated with this brand. And so please, let's all do our best to continue to support them. Let's like and subscribe on YouTube and other social media networks as well, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. And yeah, thank you again, MSA Union, for giving me this platform. And yeah, feel free to tweet me anytime. Um, and yeah, that's it from me. I'll put my Twitter handle in the description here if you want to get in touch at any point. Okay, and so that's me. Till next time, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum.